Hi AP. Okay, let's review our review sheets that we had for homework. We'll start with the figured base one. It's 2 pages. This is pretty self-explanatory. Number 1 is false. A triad is in root position if its root is the highest note. That's false. Number 2, okay, I wrote it a couple of different ways depending on if you wrote it up or down the octave. For C sharp minor, it must be minor because it's lowercase c. Capital E for E major. Lowercase g sharp for G sharp minor. So in this, you'll need to recall the intervals between the root to third, third and fifth, and root to fifth to build these triads. Number 3, the numbers 3 and 5 beneath the note indicate a triad in root position. If nothing is there, it's implied that it's in root. The flat 5 symbol means that the note a fifth above the lowest note is lowered 1 semitone. Number 5, a sharp 5 does not mean the same thing as a 5. Number 6, the first one, root is F sharp, and I have a 5 and then a sharp 3. So I don't need to write a sharp sign next to the root, which is F sharp, because I have a key signature. However, I do need to sharp the third and go from A to A sharp. And then the fifth is already a C sharp, so I don't need to draw an additional sharp sign. That's redundant. The next one I wrote down the octave in parentheses. That's also acceptable. For the third one here, just to make sure that you provide a natural sign for the third, okay, because you have a key signature that is to be read as B flat, but the figured base is telling you to raise that third up 1 semitone with the natural sign. Here's what number 7 looks like. Check your work. Okay, again, I don't need to provide for the second one here with E flat. The root is E flat. I don't need to do this, okay, because it's in the key signature, so we can erase that. Let's move on to the second page. Writing triads is indicated by the figured base symbols. The root is C. Leave 5 alone. Flat sign by itself means to flat the third. Or you can do it up the octave as I did. Root is G. Write in the third, leave it alone, even though there's a key signature. Flat the fifth. This is now going to be a diminished triad. And the third one, flat sign by itself, means to lower the third. Check your work for number 9. And number 10. If you are having difficulty reading figured base, then let's make some time to get together for some extra help. Okay, we're moving on. The next thing we will explore is the figured base and relative motion packet. It's 2 pages. Please take that out. This talks about the types of relative motion. Number 1, in similar motion, the voices move in the same direction but not by the same interval. That's very important to remember. And for number 2, we had to write the notes indicated by the figured base symbols. This was very self-explanatory. If, for example, for the first one, we had a slash through the 3 like so, then I would have to simply follow the figured base accordingly. In the second measure, next to the 6, if I put a flat 6, then I would make sure I'd have to put a flat sign up there. And in the last measure for the 5, if I had a sharp 5, I would certainly have to do this. But you don't have any of those to worry about in this question, so I'll erase them. But it's important to always follow your figured base. Number 3, in parallel motion, the voices move not only in the same direction, but also by the same interval. However, not necessarily the same quality. So you can have both the soprano and the alto, for example, moving up in voices from a major third interval to minor third interval. That's still going to be parallel motion. Number 4, write the figured bass symbols for each interval. Pretty easy. Number 5, the term parallel does not usually take into account the precise quality of the interval, as I just explained a little bit earlier. Number 6, there are 4 blanks for this question. So definitely parallel unisons, avoid. Parallel fifths, avoid. Parallel octaves, avoid. And occasionally we avoid parallel fourths, because writing parallel fourths consecutively in the same voice parts may lead to some part writing rules that could be broken. Number 7, which example or examples illustrates incorrect parallel motion? Well, if we take a look at A, this is not parallel motion at all. A is contrary. If we take a look at B, it looks as if the soprano is staying on the same note while the alto moves down, therefore making it oblique motion. Number C, soprano and alto are singing an A. Soprano and alto are moving to a B together. It's got to be C. Incorrect parallel motion. Why is it incorrect? Well, we know that the law is that we cannot write perfect parallel unisons. And D is another example of contrary motion, where you have the altos going down and the sopranos going up. Moving on to page 2, number 8. Which measure illustrates incorrect parallel motion? I think that's incorrect, actually. We'll just erase that. So for this one, what we need to first maybe do is figure out the specific intervals. So let's start with number 3. That's a D5. That's a P5. That's allowed. This is a P5 to a P5. We may have a problem there. This one is a major 6th to a minor 6th. And the last one is a P5 to a D5. So incorrect parallel motion, this would be forbidden in voice leading and part writing. So the answer to number 8 is 4. Measure 4. Number 9, which measure demonstrates oblique motion? Contrary motion, it's very easy to identify. Oblique, one voice stays the same as the other moves in a different direction. There could be another measure, but I'm definitely going with number 4 for now. Number 5, I have a P5 to a P5. So that's parallel motion, and that's actually forbidden parallel motion because they are perfect fifths. So that's not the answer. And number 6 looks to me like the voices are moving in similar motion. You have a 5th here, and then you have a 6th here. So it looks as if measure 4 is our answer. That's oblique motion. Number 10 was pretty easy, just review of figured bass. Number 11, two voices that move in opposite, that's the key word here, directions produce contrary motion. Very important. Great part writing too. Number 12, write the notes indicated by the figured bass symbols. By this point you should be pros at that. And you should also be pros at number 13, listing the type of motion in each measure. Measure 1, Soprano moves down, alto moves up. That's contrary. Number 2, both voices are moving up, but by different intervals. We have an eighth to a fifth. That's allowed, and that's similar. Number 3, parallel motion. Both voices singing a B, both voices singing an A. So it's parallel motion, but it's not allowed in part writing. Number 4, soprano moves up, alto remains static. That's oblique. Let's move on to worksheets. The figured bass open close structure worksheets. There's 3 pages here. Quick review of open and close spacing. The spacing of triad tones results in 2 kinds of structures. These are called open and close structure. There are no vacant triad tones between the upper voices when a triad is in close structure. Remember, we're dealing with only the upper voices. What are the upper voices? Soprano, alto, and tenor. So for number 3, we had to write the alto and tenor voices so that each chord is in close structure, so containing no vacant triad tones between the upper 3 voices. So we would simply have to know our triad here, A, C, E. Our second triad, looks like we have D, F, A. And our third triad, it looks as if we have A flat, C, and E flat. Why E flat? Because I have a flat 5. I need to make sure that I include that flat sign. Also, since here the root is A flat, okay, we know that we have to double the root in root position triads, so you're going to also want to put the flat sign in another voice, not just leave it as A, but you have to double the root. So if the root is A flat, then the other voice that doubles it must also be A flat. And close structure means my soprano is singing a C. The next note down, altos would need to sing an A. The next note down, tenors would need to sing the E. So that's closed structure. Here I have D, F, A. The tone below the D has to be the A, which the altos would sing. The tone below that would be an F, which the tenors would sing. That's in closed structure. And the last one, sopranos are on a C. Remember, you're working your way from the top down when you're thinking about closed structure. So C, next chord tone is an A flat. This is what I was talking about earlier. You must include this flat sign here because you have to double the root. The root is A flat. Don't leave it as A natural. Next chord tone down from A flat would be an E flat, which the tenors would sing. So all of those are in closed structure. Hopefully you did good with those. Number 4, write the alto and tenor voices so that each chord is in closed structure again. Okay, so look at mine carefully. Hopefully it'll match up with yours. The thing that concerns me the most is that you remember your figured bass. In the first chord, hopefully you sharped the 5th. So we're looking at a D sharp. If it's a D natural, it's incorrect. The second one, there's absolutely nothing in the figured bass, so it's simply a root position triad, building root 3rd, 5th with no accidentals. In the last chord, hopefully we sharped the 5th and sharped the 3rd, because a sharp sign by itself means to raise the 3rd 1 semitone. So our triad for the 3rd chord would be B, D sharp, F sharp. So hopefully you did good with that. Let's proceed. Okay, more practice with closed structure. This one is extremely close structure because look at how high the bass is in the first one. So B flat, D, F, A, C sharp, E. Why C sharp? Well, I've got a figured bass sign. 3rd chord, D, F, A. Always double the root. Don't forget about that. This is root position triads. That's why the tenor is doubling the B flat right here. Sopranos are on an F, that's the given note. The next chord tone down is a D. The next chord tone down is a B flat. So this is closed structure. Next one, sopranos start on a C sharp. The next chord tone down would be an A. The next one down from there the tenors would sing would be an E. That's closed structure. Remember, you can have the distance of two octaves between the bass and the tenor. This does not apply in structure. Last one, DFA. Sopranos are singing a D, they've already doubled the bass. Next chord tone down, A for altos, next chord tone down, F for tenors. And all of those are in closed structure. Now we want to look at open structure for number 6. Let's see how you guys did here. Okay, so first build our triads. For the first chord, C's in the bass, C. Next I need to build my triad. I'm putting an E flat because I noticed right away this flat by itself means to alter the third above the root. And then G. So there's my triad for the first chord. My triad for the second chord. Ooh, my root is a G sharp. So my third's going to be a B, and my fifth is going to be a D sharp. Why a D sharp? Because I have a sharp 5 in the figured bass. Last chord, nothing's there. Root is F. The third must be A, the fifth must be C. Go back to the first chord. Open structure, we are given that the bass is on a C, that's the root, that must be doubled in another voice. We're also given the E flat in the soprano. So E flat, then we're going to skip the C, and the altos will sing a G. Then we go from G, skipping the E flat, and the tenors would sing the C. That's now an open structure, and it's still consistent with my rule regarding the upper voices not exceeding an octave, adjacent upper voices not exceeding an octave in length. So that works. The second chord here, D flat, what tone are we skipping? We're skipping the B, going down to a G sharp for the altos. Then we skip the D sharp, so the tenors can sing the B. It's still open. Open means we can place one chord tone inside the upper voices. FAC, soprano's on an F, so we skip the C and work our way down to altos singing an A. Skip the F, so tenors can sing the C. So all of those are in open. And they do not exceed an octave in length with adjacent voices. See how you did for number 7. Number 7, make sure you observe your figured bass. Hopefully you remember to put in the F sharp. And hopefully you remember to put in the D sharp. Okay. Number 8, write the alto and tenor voices using the correct structure. Okay, and then in parentheses it says, due to the location of the given notes, each of the chords below can only be written one way. So here we have it. The first one must be written in open. The soprano is singing a very high note. C, E, G is my triad. And I'll put my chord dots in so you can see that it's an open spacing. In the second chord, the sopranos are singing a very low note. Looks to me like it's going to have to be close structure. What's my triad? D flat, F, A flat. Notice the flat 5 in the figured bass. I've got to include that next to the A. Last one, sopranos are back to a high note on an F. My triad is B flat, D, F, so I can fill my chord dots in between so you can see visually that it's open structure or open spacing. Let's see how you did with number 9. And if you're still having trouble with this, then you can do what I'm doing right now. and supply the tones that make up the triad. Although hopefully the goal is to visualize it so you don't have to always do that. Notice the flat 5 in the second example, indicating that we need a B flat. So I had to draw the flat sign there. And in the last example, I needed an F sharp because of the sharp 5, and I also needed a D sharp, but we didn't have to draw that because they took care of that for us with the D sharp given note in the soprano. Number 10, when a triad is in root position, we double the bass. That would be the correct answer to this question because the question says which voice is doubled. Okay, in parentheses, if you put the root, yes, you would be correct, but it's really not answering the question. Which voice is doubled when a triad's in root position? The bass is doubled, okay? Let's move down. Next, let's look at our SATB ranges and doubling spacing worksheet. It's 2 pages. Number 1, the voices that constitute a 4-part chorus are soprano, tenor, alto, and bass. These are the practical ranges for each voice. If you did something around this area, that would be great. I would not go higher than an A for the soprano. Don't go lower than a G for the altos in part writing and voice leading, up to a D. Tenors, nothing lower than this C. This C is even a bit low, but it's acceptable. And tenors can go all the way up to this G, G4 there. And bass, large range, the E2 all the way up to the C4. Now, keep in mind that the human voice can indeed sing below and above this range, but when you're part writing and voice leading for an SATB chorus, you want to follow these guidelines. Number 3. Okay, so alto and bass have stems down. Soprano and tenor have stems up. You guys are pretty good with that. The 4 voices in their normal distribution, you're going to hear this phrase a lot, normal distribution. We have soprano, alto, tenor, bass from highest to lowest. The bass voice is not part of the upper voices. When we talk about upper voices, we're talking about soprano, alto, and tenor. Okay, and just a quick reminder, when we talk about inner voices, we're talking about the alto and the tenor because they're inside the soprano and bass. Number 6, what is the largest interval by which adjacent upper voices should be separated? That's the octave. No more than an octave. We had to draw brackets to indicate the doubled chord tones in each triad. So in the first one, my B flat is doubled in the alto voice. In the second one, the A is doubled in the tenor voice. In the third one, the D is doubled in the soprano. Number 8, a triad in root position will have 2 roots, 1/3 and 1/5. Except for that exception from your big packet. Number 9, add the alto and tenor voices to complete each chord, checking the following carefully. Notice in the second and third example, I wrote it 2 different ways that are both acceptable. For each one, you should make sure that you're doubling the bass. The 3rd and the 5th are present. That the voices are a normal distribution, in other words, within the range, and with proper stem, and no voice crossing. You should check to see that the interval between the adjacent upper voices does not exceed an octave in length. And lastly, make sure that you've realized the figured bass with those symbols. So in this example here, in the first one, I really had no choice but to do this in close spacing because the soprano's low. In the second one, I showed you 2 different ways. Here I showed you a way of doing it in close spacing. Here I showed you a way to do it in open spacing. So your call. Same thing with the third one. We have an example of closed spacing, and here is our open spacing. For number 10, if you put one of these things, I would accept this as an answer. Okay, it's incorrectly doubled. It's missing a fifth, and the root is tripled. In either case, there's 3 C sharps here. Okay, so there's 3 roots. There's 1/3. There's no fifth. So that's the mistake.